Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Legacy of Yangchen chapter analysis video. This one is going to be for chapter 33, which is called Appetite for Bitter. And this is a fascinating chapter because it goes to basically a flashback all the way before we ever even arrived in Taku. So in between the big kind of assassination kind of moment where like Thappa got away, Honshu was assassinated, and then arriving to meet like Awashi and everyone for the convocation. So there's this kind of gap in there where Yangchen went to visit someone, and that someone is revealed to be a actually alive Ying-Su. And so what we're getting over the course of this chapter is effectively this reveal that in the same way that most of the second half of the book is about, you know, Yangchen pursuing Chai-Si, who has the secret location of her secret combustion bender Thappa in the background and she's not telling anyone, we actually get the reveal that Yangchen herself has a secret combustion bender, but in her case it's even more secret. She has actually kept this secret from everyone. It's kind of just the two of them that know. And that's a major reveal by itself, but probably the more important aspect of the chapter is that we ended the last one with her about to face a combustion blast. We ended the previous chapter earlier in the book with her about to face a combustion blast. She made it out of the first one. How did she do it that time, and what is she going to do here, facing this one almost even more directly? And why is she so confident? Well, the fact that she has a hidden combustion bender kind of gives you those answers, and I think there's just some very interesting stuff that comes out of this chapter. So let's get into this one. So like I said, it opens up with before Taku, so immediately telling you before we arrived here in the first place. The cave in Taihua, so this is the Taihua mountain range, which is basically just a mountain range in or around the northern air temple. It is a huge mountain range that kind of goes all the way across kind of the north of like the Earth Kingdom effectively. So there's a massive kind of section that this covers. But we go as far away from the northern air temple while still being in the mountain range as possible to get to this cave that apparently no air nomad or guru had ever resided in. And who is kind of staying in this cave huddled up against a rock? It is Ying-Su. So the surprise reveal that even though we were absolutely convinced she was dead, they told us she was dead. She was brought in on a stretcher alongside Zhao Yun. Now she's alive. And I think this is one of those ones where like you could not possibly call this. They hid this one very cleverly and you couldn't figure out that she had, you know, Ying-Su alive in the background. No way. But there's some interesting details here, of course. There's no campfire that would alert someone to the fact that there's someone living up here. So instead, Ying-Su is warming herself with the breath of fire technique. And Yangchen has a little bit of an aside about this, where she just notes the idea of like, it's almost weird to look at such a powerful bender capable of performing this incredible technique, combustion bending, making these explosions, that like, oh yeah, she can also do the basics as well. It's not just combustion bending that she can do. You know, it even says it here. She wouldn't cook her food by blowing it up. And I think that's cool because it's sort of the perception you have about a lot of the combustion benders is that, in a way, it's all they do. Because they're often put into situations where they kind of have to use their combustion bending. So, you know, we've basically never really seen Combustion Man use normal firebending. He, like, burns a letter, but even that is a kind of weird, kind of half combustion type technique because he just, like, stares at it and it starts to burn from the center. Bit of a, like, what's going on there? Pali at least uses normal firebending a couple of times, like when she faces off against Druk and so on. There's a couple of other smaller instances where she does it. So it just highlights that, yeah, like it makes sense. If you are a quote-unquote master or getting towards being a master of this high-level technique, you have to at least have, I suppose, some decent control over your normal firebending. But anyway, Yangchen hops off Nujian, because of course this is set before the death of Nujian, obviously. And Ying-Su is the first to speak. How is the monk, Ming-Yer? And Yangchen is the one to say this. I ruptured his lungs and eardrums. I nearly killed him. And Ying-Su's like, you saved his life. I don't know how. Thappa would have blown him to bits. I'm not exactly sure what you did with that. And Yingsu does some sort of a like, you did some sort of a thing that like stopped the combustion blast. And Yangchen in her head kind of picks up the explanation because, of course, Yingsu has no concept really of how Yangchen has dealt with combustion benders before. Because, of course, even the sucking the air out of the room technique, she didn't use on Yingsu. So the whole idea of this void is very difficult to explain, and it's noted here. It's invisible by definition. Yingsu had never seen it. So here's what actually happened, and how Yangchen saved Mingyu, and in a way, the technique she now is going to use against Thapa. Yangchen, lacking any other option, had tried to snuff out Thapa's blast with a sudden, violent version of the maneuver, centering the vacuum on the pinpoint terminus of the shot. And spirits be praised, it had worked. Not without cost though. Mingyu had been caught in the radius of the bubble, subject to both the sudden, instantaneous lack of air, and then the battering turbulence of winds rushing back to fill the empty space. Yangchen had inflicted almost as much damage on him as the shockwave of a real explosion. She'd innovated a worse version of an already deadly technique. So she's taking the idea of sucking the air out of the room, which is a thing that happens quite slowly, which is why you see the people sort of like slowly fade out, they get weaker, then pass out. This is that, but like if she just full on like in an instant, the room went from having air in it to just gone. And that's what she's doing here on a pinpoint level. So we know a combustion blast as it comes in, it's kind of like the kind of white wisp almost with the little rings as it pops through the air. But then it sort of hits a point where like, okay, this is where the explosion is about to go off. And so what Yangchen has done is she's created this kind of void of like, she's taken the air out of like a bubble surrounding where the shot ends up. And this is what completely snuffs out the combustion blast because it doesn't have the air to actually, you know, fuel kind of the explosion to a certain degree. But we get an idea of sort of like the positioning here. So the idea seems to be that as Yangchen jumped up to go after Mingyu, she didn't quite make it in time. So the blast, of course, was aimed at Mingyu. Yangchen, from a little bit of a distance away, had to rip this bubble open. And she had to basically catch Mingyu in it. And so we get just the idea it's this like pressure damage effectively that Mingyu suffers from. This is why there's no explosive damage on him, because you'd think, yeah, why didn't both of them get blown to bits? Why are they not at least burned in some way? But no, it was solely pressure damage. So this is what actually happened. It was Yangchen who caused all of that damage. By just creating a void, so he suddenly had no air. And then it, you know, the air kind of came in. This is what collapsed his lungs and burst his eardrums. So the you know, suddenness of the kind of pressure change, that's what actually did the damage. Yingsu does explain that, you know, you got him to the ground, you covered him long enough for Thapa to give up and retreat. Thapa must have escaped with help. I can't believe his rescuers, you know, would let him take a shot at me. And Yangchen's just thinking to herself, like, oh, maybe he fits their needs better. They didn't want you anymore. Maybe you were now a loose end rather than an asset. There's no way to be sure. What we seem to know about that is Thapa made this decision, like, basically completely on his own. Chaisi can accept it to a certain degree because Thapa was the most, you know, open to brainwashing. So it has the most effect on him. Whereas I guess the idea is Zhao Yun and Yingsu are both more able to resist maybe the brainwashing, and that might have made them a little bit harder to deal with, so she can accept just having the one combustion bender. But we do get this idea that, you know, Yingsu is, you know, working with Yangchen here. Like, they seem to have a kind of an agreement, a little bit of a kind of camaraderie going on here that, you know, could develop into this kind of friendship, basically. Yingsu does ask, you know, is Zhao Yun dead? He is, and so are you. You played a convincing corpse. They don't explain the exact details of how exactly, you know, Yangchen got Yingsu out of the hospital without anyone knowing. But the idea seems to be just that in the chaos of everything going on, the need for other people to be healed for minor injuries and stuff like that, no one was focused on the people that were clearly stretchered in dead. That's the idea. Even though they're the powerful combustion benders, they were stretched in dead. No one's focused on them, and I think just Yangchen took an opportunity and got Yingsu out. So it doesn't really need too much more of an explanation. So Yangchen does want to basically allow Yingsu to kind of live discreetly once she avoids trouble. And then Yingsu's a little bit like, you'd really let me go free? And she just points like, yeah, if you keep your head down, if you try to cause trouble with your ability, you'd raise a flag to basically everyone and draw them towards you, and being hunted is no way to live. Where would I go? And she points out that, I relocated, basically Taegum and Akudan. I can, of course, relocate you as well, because I have air nomad privileges to put you anywhere you want. How about we start with, which island in the Fire Nation are you from? And Yingsu kind of surprises everyone, including Yangchen, with, I'm from the Earth Kingdom. Well, I have Fire Nation ancestors, of course, but I come from a village of mountain guides in Kalau. Now, this is obviously the Kalau mountain range, which is the one where the secret tunnel, the Cave of Two Lovers kind of goes through. So we're talking more the Omashu kind of region here. So yeah, family of mountain guides, interesting stuff. And she always thought that the reason that she survived unanimity was because she had good lungs and was used to breathing thin air. So another mention on that side of things, which as far as we're aware seems to be related more to the second phase of whatever training they went through, which is actually after the initial kind of chained underwater thing, where you would think you also need to have powerful lungs, but apparently it's more the second stage where you actually really need them, because again, Raite is implied to have passed the initial one, and he said he couldn't do the second one, or hadn't moved on to the second one yet because he's not big enough, he doesn't have the lungs, I guess, for it, or whatever. So I'm guessing this is maybe more where the breathing technique comes in, and actually learning to build up to a purposeful combustion blast, because again, Raite, when he used it, I think only did one breath, which I think speaks to the idea he didn't prepare the technique properly or anything like that. So he hadn't gone through the training. So yeah, that's that. She does then explain, wait, okay, if you lived in the Earth Kingdom, how did you come to be part of Project Unanimity? And while they don't fully connect the dots, I think you get a sense here. She says, my parents tried moving to new parts, but we got caught on the wrong side of the Platinum Affair and weren't able to return. Yangchen even notes, just like Kavik. So the idea is they moved somewhere, Platinum Affair came down, and then all of a sudden travel between the different nations is heavily restricted, of course. Kavik and his parents couldn't get out of Bin and wherever they were, they couldn't get out either. So I don't know what the explanation on this is perhaps going to be of did they maybe move to Jondari or somewhere nearby, or were they somewhere else? But the idea just seems to be that after that point, I'm guessing some of Chaisi's recruiters kind of came across Yingsu and her family and recruited Yingsu to the project, and that's kind of how it happened. They don't actually explain that bit within the chapter, but I think the implications, that's kind of how everyone came to join the project, is just, hey, you're in a tough situation, you'll earn money doing this project. Yangchen does say, though, there is a catch to this. It isn't as simple as just, I immediately let you go. Yingsu kind of jokes, and here I thought you were different than the other team. Yangchen does note to herself, not different enough. She wished she didn't have to be like this, but in dealing with something so important as this, she has to get everything she possibly can from Yingsu while she has the chance. She, of course, wants to know, how many people in the world can do what you do? How many combustion benders are there? Yingsu says, I couldn't tell you for certain. And Yangchen is like, really? After all of this, you're being vague with me? But she says, no, really. Thapa, Zhao Yun, and I were the first to complete our training. There were other groups behind us, still in the earlier stages of the program. They were younger, so that's referring to Raite and all of the others. There's no real explanation beyond this here about, how much setup there is for if there are other combustion benders. But obviously, the island was empty. We haven't obviously been teased with the idea that there are other combustion benders out there. I'd say about the only thing would be the group that left on the boat that they didn't take Raite and Xian with them. They could have potentially survived the storm that they assume like killed everyone, but you know, that's the only really other option. Otherwise, it does seem like Ying-Su is the last remaining kind of combustion bender in the world right now, or even character who has the potential for combustion bending, at least. So that's the kind of whole idea there. So Yangchen then is just like, okay, then tell me where the island is so I can check for myself. Like, you probably don't know exactly where it is, so just give me like a rough guide, anything you know, and I can probably find it from there. Ying-Su does say they took care to keep us in the dark, but orienteering is in my blood. I can basically tell you exactly where it is. So Yangchen is like, whoa, this, I wasn't expecting this to basically just effectively have that information immediately. But Ying-Su does say, you probably can't like use the information as directly as you want, because if you just find the island immediately, they will immediately assume you got the information from a first-hand source, which she has. So there's the need here to basically kind of create a ruse, like obfuscate the situation effectively, and make it clear that Yangchen learned this information from somewhere else. And so Yangchen thinks to herself and is just like, I could create a ruse, run it on my own team, have them complete a fake mission and claim that was how I learned about the island, which is actually what happens. This is the whole Sparrowbones game with the Zongdus and Master Liu. This is the whole Akudan and Taiyugum go after Iwashi's ship to get the books to figure it out. This is where we get the reveal. Yangchen didn't actually need to do any of that. The reason she has done that is to basically lead everyone astray, including her own team. But I suppose the ultimate aim of this is mostly to kind of lead the likes of Chicey astray, of like, hey, I don't have any extra information. I'm using anything I can to get the information. I will track the island down through Iwashi. And so Chicey is just like, well, I've already abandoned the island. You're not really going to find anything of particular note on the island. I can let you go ahead with that, and I don't suspect you of having done anything more than that. Chicey would never assume Yangchen actually has her own secret combustion bender in the background. And that's the kind of, in a way, magic of this situation here. Yangchen thinks this through kind of perfectly and realizes that, like, yeah, if I'm lying to everyone about you, no one will know that you're alive, gave me any information, and this is an edge I have in every possible situation. So this is the full, whole like compartmentalization of information to the extreme here, in that like only Yangchen and Ying-Su actually know this. So she does note though that, like, I would have to lie to my companions. But Ying-Su kind of argues that, like, this is the group that's helped you in the past. They'll be fine. Like, they're your friends, you can trust them to be competent and complete the mission, so that, if you're worried about putting them on a dangerous mission that doesn't really mean anything, they'll accomplish it because they're working for you. And basically, I suppose it's kind of implied at the end that, like, they will accept why you did this, lying to them, because of the magnitude of the mission. So that's that. Final thing that Yangchen wants from Ying-Su. I want you to try to blow me up. So what we get here is Yangchen wants to train with a combustion bender to perfect the technique she used kind of on a whim back in the chapter The Duel, to, like, this is how she quote-unquote saved Ming-Yer, or at least nullified the combustion blast. She wants to train to be able to use that at will and really understand it more than what she did, because I'm guessing the idea is she did a particularly extreme version of this and it nearly killed someone. She's trying to perfect it in a way where it's maybe a little bit more of a delicate maneuver, and it's kind of just enough power exerted to, diminish the combustion blast, without having to do a giant void in the middle of kind of nowhere. That's the sort of idea here. So it's Yangchen just accepting that, like, okay, I'll train this technique. This is how she is truly going to use Ying-Su. she's not going to do what Chai-Si is doing and have kind of Yingsu just be hidden somewhere in the background, ready to take someone out for her when she needs to. That is not Yangchen's style. So instead, she's just going to like, hey, I will learn everything I can about this technique and know exactly how to counter it. That's probably the best way to do it here, knowing that there's probably a confrontation with Thapa going to happen in the future, which is the setup from the last chapter. So Yingsu's just like, do you have a death wish? You know, I'm not going to shoot you point blank. Yangchen suddenly gets quite business about this, and it's just like, you owe me, do this. I saved you from bleeding out in Bin-Er. I saved you from Thapa. I hold the keys to your chance at ever living in peace. You are so deep in my pocket, you're covered in lint. If I want you to attack me, then you attack me. And we then get this very interesting section here as we approach the end of the chapter, where Yangchen notes that she wants to get as much value as possible from effectively saving Yingsu like this. And she references this in the context of, I could and arguably should have just killed all 3 combustion benders. Take them out of the picture, and then we wouldn't have this situation with Chai-Si or any of this going on. They would be taken out of the picture, and suddenly there would be nothing particularly for anyone to fight over. But Yangchen has ultimately made the decision to not eliminate any of them. It has caused problems, but it has put her in this situation now where she has her combustion bender, Chai-Si has hers. She has to get the key information out of Yingsu to counter Thapa. And it's really interesting because she points out the idea of like that everyone would understand her killing the combustion benders because it would have been her defending Bin-Er and herself, but it would have a burden on her. But that could still be in a way like argued away with the idea that another avatar would have decided to easily. This she knew for a fact from having lived through so many similar moments. So it is Yangchen kind of going through her idea of, is she kind of willing to kind of like kill people to do the role of the avatar? And she seems to settle on the idea of ultimately she will not waste lives in the way that I have 3 combustion benders, the world would be a better place if they were all gone. She's not just going to kill kind of wantonly like that. But as we'll see in like the following chapter, there's a willingness to kind of accept that if I'm put in a situation where I feel like it has to be sort of like the people around us or Thapa dies effectively, I have to eliminate Thapa. So she makes that kind of decision, and it's obviously very different than like previous characters who've kind of dealt with this topic of like, you know, the Kyoshi novels exploring, you know, kind of Kyoshi's kind of willingness to kill, Aang and his kind of unwillingness to kill. This is kind of someone somewhere in the middle, because again, Yangchen's advice to Aang ultimately was, you need to be sort of like selfless and for the world in this situation. You need to sacrifice to a certain degree your own spiritual beliefs to do what is right for the world. And so Yangchen kind of in this moment is kind of going through that kind of calculation here. And it's all summed up quite nicely with this. So in her head, she kind of thinks, I need to know my mercy was worth something. I need to know that keeping you, Yingsu, alive until now wasn't a mistake, that there are merits to forgiveness and clemency, or else I have nothing to stand on, or else there was no point in being Yangchen anymore. So that's what she's really placed on this situation, is the idea of, please tell me that it is not an inherent negative to save the lives of people. Like, tell me that the correct decision is not always to just wipe people out. That's a kind of Chai-Si kind of situation there. That's kind of proving Chai-Si right in the way that she just deals with people instantaneously. Yangchen, of course, has been dealing with the idea of kind of humanity in a way, like the people around her, but also her own humanity, and like she could be this godlike avatar or the very kind of vulnerable kind of human person that she is. And she needs to get this kind of proof here of just like, please give me the win on this one. Make it so that me sparing the 3 in the first place and then saving Yingsu in this instant, make this actually work, and that me caring about people's lives is something that is valued in the world. And she's staking a lot on this, because if this fails, you kind of feel like this might be the point where she completely falters and goes down the path that you kind of don't want her to go down. But she has to continue on and convince Yingsu. What's the matter? Afraid you'll kill the Avatar? You weren't such a coward in Bin Yingsu gets up and she's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. How do you know I won't go for the immediate lethal shot and escape for myself? Yangchen just points to Nujan and is just like, Nujan has your supplies and shelter, and he'll flee if you kill me. And even though you're a mountaineer with lots of experience, look at where we are. We're in a super isolated area of the Taiwan Mountains. We're like high up, out of the way, super isolated area. You don't even really know the path up here, so how are you going to get down is effectively the idea. There's no way you're going to get down to safety kind of unaided in this situation. And Yingsu's like, you are a horrible little girl, you know that? And so she says, ultimately agreeing to it all, come on, we need twice as much distance for this to have a chance at being remotely safe. And so they're going to do the training here, of course. So, important chapter, big chapter here, a lot going on. Obviously the Yingsu reveal is like probably like the biggest like kind of surprise reveal in the book, because they literally told you she was dead earlier on. Now they revealed she's alive, and how this changes up so many kind of dynamics in the book, how it makes you look back on quite a few of the chapters very differently, because now you have in a way the proper ending to the chapter, the duel. You look at the idea of the chapter following that and like, oh, Yingsu was just acting dead in that chapter. And then ever since they've got to Taku, Yangchen has had the idea that I have Yingsu in my back pocket the entire time. Even the reveal that the whole Sparrowbone section was kind of this like unneeded thing that is just this literally like masking over how she actually acquired certain information. That she had to put the team at risk to a quite big degree during that situation to get what they needed to. Now, the benefit of the money they earned from Iwashi during the gambling is an actual bonus that will be very helpful, of course, but it speaks to the idea of like she basically had to run a scheme effectively on her entire team. That here is something like everyone trusts Yangchen, but she has just kept something huge from the entire team here. So like that does need to be noted. Unfortunately, like again, even though we have Yingsu here, we really don't learn more about like the combustion bending process. And I get it to a certain degree, because Yangchen really only wants to know, can you tell me for sure it is just you three? Are there others? And she only knows a certain amount about that. I do appreciate, you know, we also get to learn some backstory details on Yingsu, that she's actually from the Earth Kingdom, and, you know, she also was impacted by the Platinum Affair happening, and that kind of locking her and her family down. Now, a lot of people kind of ask the question, you know, like, okay, how old is Yingsu? It's kind of difficult to get a particular judge on that. That might be the, you know, her parents, you know, her moving with her parents in the Platinum Affair, which was like 8 years ago. That maybe gives you a slight sense. Okay, that would probably place her probably being maybe like mid-20s, which is probably in or around where I put her, where like she's clearly older than Yangchen by like a reasonable margin, but I wouldn't place Yingsu as being like really old or anything like that. So I'm saying like mid-20s, maybe late 20s at the absolute most, because I don't know, just from her character, and willing to sort of quote-unquote like banter back and forth with Yangchen, I do get the sense that they're at least somewhat close to each other on a kind of maturity level, even if like there's quite a few years between them. Because you do have the moment at the end where she calls like Yangchen like, you are a horrible little girl. So I think, you know, a kind of quote-unquote generation between the two of them I think would roughly kind of make sense to a certain degree. But that's just an interesting point. Like, we don't really have a sense for even like how old Thoppa is necessarily. You probably maybe place him as being like a little bit older again, but it's just interesting to think about. But yeah, it is a notable reveal, especially with what they'll kind of go on to do, because the setup from the start is that, oh, once you help me out, I'll just relocate you somewhere and leave you there. But that is not really kind of the kind of net result of this ultimately. And in fact, they make the decision more to be like, what if Ying-Su was a kind of pseudo Team Avatar member? And that's a really interesting idea. But you really want the kind of follow-up book to kind of see that happen and see how that actually works out. Because it's this kind of very interesting decision of like, kind of like it's a decision Yangchen has kind of refused to make the entire book of like, I won't use you as an asset in the same way that like everyone else wants to use the combustion benders as assets. But in a way, what if she did? Like, what if she did? And it's actually the person you can trust the most with that technique, using it. It would allow Yangchen to do the stuff that she wants, but we will get to that a little bit later on. But yeah, we get the training, and we're going to see what happens in the next chapter, of course. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this kind of hugely impactful twist-turn chapter, seeing Ying-Su again and everything else that happened in the chapter. So let me know what your thoughts are, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.